Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of PostBurnout.com interviews, we talk with guitarist Sonny Campbell and drummer Harry Phox of the Dublin post-rock duo Geo Postal. The two discuss their formation, their debut single Planet Express, and their goal to revitalise the Irish post-rock scene. Also, one thing I want to note is at the beginning of this interview, Harry was running late and me and Sonny were waiting for him, and so me and Sonny had actually been talking for about half an hour or something prior to this. And yeah, so Harry joins kind of later on the interview. So for the most part, it's just me and Sonny. Yeah, anyway, enjoy. So, Sonny, I guess we have to pretend like we're just starting for the first time now.
Of course.
We've been talking for the last 10 minutes or something. But
Yeah.
so tell me, how did Geopostal begin?
So yeah, Geo Postal originally started kind of for me in COVID. I think like a lot of people trapped in the house, I had an instrument there and just kind of started playing. I have played music since I was maybe 13, 14. I mean, younger than that, I took piano lessons as a kid, but
Yeah.
so many people did, and then it sort of goes by the wayside. But 13, 14, I started playing bass, and I played bass most of my life. But over COVID, then because I was sort of trapped in there on my own, I thought, oh, I'll pick up the guitar. I picked it up a couple of times down through the years, so I wasn't really starting from scratch. I knew basic chords and things like that, but I just was like, if I'm going to be here on my own, I might as well pick up this sort of instrument that I can kind of accompany myself more, and I don't need to be part of a band.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, it really stuck this time. The inspiration started coming down through the years. When I picked up guitar before, it had been like a month here or a month there, but it never really grabbed
Yep.
hold of me. And so when when I had nothing else to do except play some music and play guitar, finally it really took hold. And so it started with just kind of noodling and screwing around at home, but I had always been a big fan of the kind of instrumental post rock sound, and even not necessarily just post rock, but instrumental stuff. There's like electronic producers I like John Hopkins or Niels Fram, who are, the sort of neoclassical piano combined with the big chaotic electronic elements. That big sort of shift of dynamics, I think, is the thing that really catches me in whatever shape it comes. And so post rock was another sort of avenue for that. And that was, for me, where it started was, yeah, just a guitar at home, screwing around with some effects and making a bit of noise. And then it would have been at the end of, not last year, the end of 2022, I finally sort of worked up the courage to like, okay, I have a couple of songs, I like them, I'm happy with them, I'm proud of them. I want to go and start playing live. So there's a few open mics around Dublin. Smithfield Creatives, I don't know if you know Adam Kelly from Smithfield Creatives.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Flow Show that used to be on in Workman's upstairs, and a few of those sort of open mic things where at first I just started showing up to kind of suss it out and get the vibe of the place and see, meet people, show my face, see what it was
Yeah.
like. And so many of those open mics are so welcoming and so warm, and like such a great community around there. That I finally worked up the courage to go and play. And when
So
it was
was this
just
your first time playing live, or had you played live before that?
I played live a couple of times before that. I was in a band with some of my good friends down in Galway, and we were sort of on again, off again down through the years, but it just sort of, life gets in the way, people are busy,
Sure.
kind of fizzled out. And that was, part of the reason that I just started doing it myself and picking up the guitar was because, when I was relying on other people to show up, uh, I was sort of at their mercy to sort of play together. But if I was at home doing it myself, I could just sort of start. Um, because I love music, I love playing it, and I wanted to do it more. So yeah, I started doing the open mics, and with just myself trying to do a big post rock sound. What I sort of use is I run my guitar into Ableton, which is where I
Okay.
have all of my effects and like amp simulator stuff. And I record certain guitar layers, and then I do like lots of lead stuff and play over that. And so that was the first sort of the first live performance was just myself and a guitar and my laptop at one of these open mics.
Yeah.
And I wanted a bass player and I wanted a drummer and I wanted all of this, but kind of the same way as the band, I was just going to do it until I found those people. I was happy to just go out and have fun. And like I said, the community is great. Met a bunch of people, made some, good friends through it. And so I kind of kept going. And that was where I actually met Harry, was at one of the Smithfield Creative Nights. I was like playing, performing, and it was funny. I was like playing away, but just kind of out of the corner of my eye, sort of, I could hear somebody like tapping along a sort of drum beat on their like
Yeah.
legs or whatever in the corner. And I thought it was Andy, one of the guys I know through it. And like kind of after one of the songs, I was like, "Oh, that was really good, Andy." That beat sounded really good with it. But so I did 2 or 3 songs or whatever. And then afterwards, Harry, came up to me and said, "Oh, if you're ever looking for a drummer, to come and play with you, like I love post-rock sound, I love that. And so I watch you from afar, God is an astronaut, these kind of, the Irish bands who
Yeah.
have the sound and do what we're doing." So yeah, I basically grabbed a hold of him and I was like, "I need a drummer, never leave, please." So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of Geo Postal as the two of us.
Yeah.
After that,
Had you already been known by that name, or?
no, up until that point, I was just sort of performing under my own name, just sort of
Yeah.
going out and doing it. And he came. We went for our first jam, I think in Temple Lane Studios downstairs there. And like the funny thing is, Planet Express, the song that our first single we just released, that came out of that first jam. The initial idea for that, like I had a bunch of songs that we played through, but we just sort of got a jam going, and it just sort of there was an idea there. We were sure, we worked on it over time, and it sort of evolved into what it is now. But that was the first song that we kind of start to finish wrote together as a piece and put together. So it's cool, seeing that be our first single as well, and having it out in the world now.
Yeah.
The name Geopostal, it started with the Geological Postal Service
Yeah.
was what we were originally going to go with. A nice post rock pun, but it was just such a mouthful to say.
Yeah.
And if you ever said somebody's like, "Oh, what's your band name?" and you say the Geological Postal Service, they just look at you and their eyes glaze over, and you're like, "Okay, maybe."
You're like, "No, it's really good. Trust us."
Exactly. And post rock, it's a cliche, post rock bands have these big long wordy names,
Yeah, I
but
was thinking that.
I think just the word starting with the word geological is just such a word vomit that it was kind of too much. And so other people started referring to us as geopostal,
Yeah.
just as a shorter version of it. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, people see it as that, so let's use that as the name. And it still kind of gets what we're going for across. We can still use all the same ideas and design and themes that we had before, but it's a much more condensed package of it. So the name still lives on, and it's the sort of it's the top of our short list for our first album name.
Yeah.
As yeah, you know, I think with the semi eponymous, was it what Deminder said
Yes,
in
yes.
the interview? Yeah, I was reading the interview with them and I saw that and I was like, that's a great word, semi eponymous. So we can still sort of keep the origins of the name, but in a new form.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that kind of like condensed form is you mentioned there, the kind of sort of the Irish kind of post rock scene, like God's an astronaut, and so I watch you from afar, and it's like I remember like when those bands were like really big, and like every time they do a show like sell out, and they play like the Button Factory or the Academy, which are kind of like I guess like sort of mid-sized venues, but like with very like dedicated fan base, and it showed that I think that kind of like music could be popular here, and did have I can't remember. I think like some of their songs were like featured on like TV. It was like background noise. If I could be getting that wrong, but like I do remember like a lot of buzz of them, like in the musical press and stuff like that. And they would do kind of the festivals at the time, like I guess like Oxygen or something would still be around then. Kind of like all these kind of like festivals and like early Electric Picnic and stuff. And
Mhm.
do you find as kind of a template, did you find that kind of uh it kind of influence your decision to go with the genre, the fact that it could have legs and that it could get noticed here, or was this just going to be the solid music you're going to play, like regardless of the perception of it?
I think for me, it was definitely just the style of music that naturally comes to me. I was just writing it. It felt natural as the music I listened to. It was, you know, it's niche. It's a niche as a genre, and I think exactly as you said, it's one of those genres that if you get a following, you get a really sort of committed, dedicated following.
Yeah.
So it's sort of about finding those people because when you find them, they're really into it. But it a lot of the time, it doesn't really have that huge appeal. The sort of
Yeah.
bands that come to mind that maybe do would be someone like Sigur Rós, people like that, where it sort of transcends the
Yeah.
post-rock genre into something bigger and more magical, let's say. But yeah, those sort of bands, Overhead the Albatross is another
Yeah.
one who we sort of look at as a template for what is possible. It was funny when we went into the studio uh, to record these two songs. Um, David, who we were speaking to, who we were working with, he basically said, I think it was like in the 90s, early 2000s, there was actually a really big post-rock scene in Ireland. Like it was,
Okay.
quite popular and there was, a lot of bands doing the same sort of thing and getting, quite successful. But it sort of went away for whatever reason. People got out of it. And so we're here to try and rejuvenate it, bring some fresh life into it and bring some fresh energy. And one
Also,
of the
now you
things,
have the sorry, but
no, go ahead.
now you have the benefit because like back then it'd be like burning CDRs and kind of like hand them around. So if you didn't have a label or like starting your own label or trying to make connection, but like now, you do have the power of like self-releasing. So you could theoretically, if you got the reach, be as popular as like any other act on the scene.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great piece of the modern age is, TikTok is where it's at now to find fans,
Until it's
find
banned.
the right
Until it's banned.
until it's banned. Exactly right. Until it's banned. But there will, I think we've reached a point where there will always be a TikTok equivalent now,
Yeah.
whatever new like app that comes in, this short form stuff is kind of here to stay, I think.
Yeah.
But one of the things what I was saying is, uh, like on that, one of the things that we're trying to do is get a regular post rock night going in Dublin.
Oh,
There's a
sick.
couple of
Yeah.
bands that we've played with or seen around that we want to start doing a regular gig with to sort of help, encourage
Elevate.
that
Yeah.
and find that fan base. If because post rock fans are pretty dedicated when there's something on, they'll show up to stuff like that. So there's a band called Silverglass, who they're a bit more sort of math rock sort of sounding, but
Yeah.
a similar kind of produced electronic sound that's really cool. We did a gig with a band from Belfast called Space Shepherds. Um, sorry. There's a band called Space Shepherds from Belfast who they improv the whole set, which was
Okay.
wild to see. Like it sounded class, it was so good, but their whole thing is, again, it's a similar post-rock sound, but
Yeah.
they do it all. They do it all live. They have a couple of ideas, I'm sure, that they've jammed with a few times, and they've played together, I think, years at this stage. But it was incredible to just see them go up there, and it felt like a natural half hour, 40-minute set that
Yeah.
super impressive.
Yeah, that's
So
really cool. Like the idea of like doing the improv like in front of an audience. Although I imagine it'd be very daunting if I didn't have the anchor of like known songs to go up if I was performing. But as an attendee, that sounds like really cool. But yeah,
yeah,
I would never commit to it myself.
it's something that myself and Harry have talked about a few times to try and maybe incorporate improv elements,
Mm.
between songs and that kind of transition from A to B, stuff like that. But I think I'd be very much the same as you. It's like I know what I know how to play, and
Yeah,
once
yeah.
the sort of training wheels are off,
Well,
it's
it does take a lot of confidence. Like even like because you mentioned like when you first got into the studio, there was like a lot of jamming. I've done jamming, and like personally, I always like in the studio setting, and I always just get like really intimidated. I'm always like, what if I like fuck up? What if I do it bad? You know what I mean? I'm too like I'm too in my own head about it. Like I like going away, writing a song, structuring a song on my own, then bringing it to a band. I don't like the idea of like improv, but I mean, I think like if it works, it works. It's just my own self consciousness.
yeah,
How do you
yeah.
feel
Like
about that?
for myself, like similarly, I don't do enough sort of that kind of playing in my own like time, that sort of just improv and ideas and linking things together to sort of really have that comfort to do it live.
Yep.
But when we go just for a rehearsal, after we've kind of gone through the stuff we want to go through, we always do, a half an hour or 40 minutes of just like fucking around. He'll
Yeah.
just start playing a beat, I'll just start screwing around, and like both of us are just sloppy and messy or whatever, but we might get 8 seconds of something
Yep.
where we're like, that was cool. So that's the point where I'll take that, like we record that little snippet or that idea, then I'll take that and go away, and I'm like, okay, how do I build on this?
Yeah.
And that, similar to like Planet Express, that's kind of how that came about, was just us, sloppy, messing, screwing around, and then having a little nugget of an idea that I'll then go away and sort of build on and try and turn into more of a song.
Yeah. Do you record your practice sessions so that you have like a reference, or do you just kind of like go back to it and like try and remember what you did?
We try and record um, whenever we're having like a jam and we'll find an idea. At that point, I'll get the recorder from a phone and
Okay.
just throw it in the corner of the room, just something to like re-trigger, the
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
in my brain, because there's countless times where we're like, we should have recorded that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
totally forgot what it is.
But the weird thing I've had a situation like that where I go, that's a really good like riff or whatever, and then like I know how to play it, so I'm like, okay, I take a mental note of, like, okay, here's the structure basically, and then like I go back and play it later and just doesn't sound the same. I can't like even explain it. It drives me insane.
It's something that I I've heard so many other musicians talk about and totally find myself now, and I'm trying to be more vigilant of and cognizant of. Is like, if when I get an idea now, I try and ride that feeling until the end.
Yep.
So just get from there to the structure of a song, even if it's just like, here's a verse and a chorus and another piece that I'm not fully sure of. Because exactly as you said, like there is, when that magic comes and you have it, you want to just grab a hold of it and see, how far you can take it. Because I've lost, you know, countless ideas and riffs and things
Yeah.
just because I was like, oh, I'll come back to that. I need to go and do this thing. And then whatever piece of inspiration or whatever magic was there
It's just gone.
has just disappeared. Yeah. I think I was
Yeah.
listening to an interview with John Mayer, and he was saying, when that happens to him, he writes off the rest of the night until it's finished. He, if he had dinner plans, if he had this, he's like, no, catch a hold of it, finish out the idea, so that when you come back to it, you don't have to try and recapture the feeling to build the rest of the song. If the feeling is already there, you have the song. And at that point, it's like, okay, just structure and improvement and things like that. So one of the songs we're actually going into the studio next week to record is a song called Late Night or Late Night Sky, something like that. But it's called Late Night because I had a moment like that. It was, 11 o'clock at night. I was just sort of noodling on the guitar and I got an idea, and that little piece of magic happened. And then it was 3 o'clock in the morning before I went to bed because I just said, I'm not letting this go. This one I'm finishing out to the end. And because I stuck with it, I basically had, as come the end of it, I had, the song. There was tons of stuff to like tweak and figure out, but it was there. And so I try and remain vigilant for those moments to just sit in it and capture it, and then I can move on.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask, actually, just kind of like going a bit back sort of to your background. I mean, you mentioned that you're from Galway. I was wondering kind of what brought you to Dublin, and do you still kind of like remain attached to the kind of like Galway music scene? Because I think like Galway's always been a great musical city, but I think stuff is really like going off lately. Again, just from an outsider's perspective looking in, like it seems like Galway's really starting to like um become great for like smaller independent artists, and kind of sort of bringing new kind of interests and even kind of bizarro acts to the city. I was wondering like how you find you're still connected to that scene, or yeah.
So Galway is one of the places I really want to go and play a gig, do a gig down there. So, we're hoping over the summer to get something organized. It's funny, like when I lived in Galway, I was never particularly connected to the music scene outside of like going to the Roisin or the arts festival beyond just the generic stuff, right?
Mhm.
But as I've started playing music and kind of really got into the music scene and paid more attention to it, it's crazy to see just how much is going on all over that I was completely unaware of. You
Yeah.
know, there's a bunch of great nights down there. A modern movement is one of them that's been going on regularly that we'd love to go down and play. Absent, I think, is another night that goes on down there for sort of indie bands. And I'm trying to collect anytime I see one of these nights pop up. I try, like, I have a giant list that I've saved sort of in my phone on my computer of just gig events and organizers across the country
Yeah.
that, okay, I need to reach out to these people and see if, they're looking for a sound or a gig. And that was sort of how I came across you guys, as I saw Deminda post a link to the interview where I went on. And so anytime I see a band that, I'm connected with post something, whether it's interview, gig, press, the event, whatever, I just add that to the list. And I'm like, okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff there to reach out to. So yeah, with Galway, like I think the big success story recently from Galway has been New Dad,
Yeah,
who
they're
are
insanely good.
blowing
Yeah.
up totally now.
Yeah.
I love their sound, really cool, really, really cool music.
Yeah, their
Um,
album Madra has just been on repeat for me. It's so good.
yeah,
Yeah.
they've just captured a kind of amazing shoegazy sort of
Yeah.
sound that I'm a big fan of, and seeing them over the last year just get bigger and bigger, supporting I think Paolo Nutini at one
Mhm.
point, and getting there has been uh, kind of inspiring and exciting to see for them, and especially just people from my hometown Galway. It's great,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
they're just
interviewed them for the
performing now.
Goo. They're very nice people.
Really?
Yeah, they're lovely.
Okay. No, I haven't met them, but yeah, they struck me as sound heads.
Mm. No, they really are. Yeah. But so
Sorry, I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Harry might be. Oh no, he's a few minutes away. Sorry,
No
go
worries.
on.
But so, what kind of brought you to Dublin? Was it to pursue music, or was it just life in general, and then music just kind of happened?
Yeah, it was life in general, really. after I finished studying at NUIG, I went and did a master's over in London. And so I lived there for about 18 months. And then I moved to Australia for 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I didn't, I honestly didn't want to leave Australia. I was
Yeah.
living in Melbourne there and, had found a great community of people. Just, I loved the lifestyle over there and everything. But it was very far away from home. It was very, very far. And I ended up with the job I was working on, I went back to the office in London. And after a couple of months, I wasn't enjoying it there anymore. So at that point, I wanted to move back a bit closer to home. But after growing up and going to college in Galway, it just sort of got smaller and smaller and smaller. And
Yeah.
so Dublin was a nice, you know, bigger sort of a proper city, but
Yeah.
still close enough to home that I can just hop on a train or drive down to Galway in a couple of hours, and it's nice and easy. So it was a nice middle ground between not being too close to home, but available whenever I want to go back.
Yeah, that's really nice, actually. So, yeah, one thing I was kind of wondering there, based on what you were saying, I mean, like, yeah, Melbourne, London, Dublin, Galway. Do you find like, in any way, like the place you're in at any given time, kind of influences your solid music, or do you find again it would just be consistent regardless where in the world you lived?
I I
Because I mean,
definitely
you're involved with like different art scenes and different music scenes just organically, like wherever you are.
yeah. Um Interesting question. I think I think for me it's less to do specifically with the place, and it's more the kind of people or the sort of time that I'm there.
Yeah.
When I was in London, I was big into electronic music because I just sort of come out of college and I was just sort of, I grew up listening to new metal bands, the Korn, Limp Bizkit, Deftones, that was the sort of sound of my 12 to, I don't know, 17, 18.
Okay.
Kind
I
of got
can
to
have say
college.
28.
No, I sort of got out of it then through college, was much more electronic. I had kind of John Hopkins, Fortet, things like that were, I was a big fan of. I think it was, yeah. And then I got to Australia and uh, when the fellow I was living with over there, the Scottish guy, he was the one who sort of really put me onto post rock because he always listened to it and he sort of introduced me to a couple of bands that he really liked. And it just sort of started there because, as I was saying, it was kind of a natural transition from that electronic style of music to this similar thing with big dynamics and a lot of sort of ambience in there combined with the kind of chaotic, more energetic side of it, that it felt like a natural transition back to the like live music, playing instruments and that. And so it was a nice combination of that for a while. And then last summer, I went over to Download in the UK. A friend of mine from Canada, she was supposed to go with a friend. Her friend had to back out last minute, so she just had an extra ticket and asked if I would go because she knew I was close. And I was like, hell yes. And so that has turned me right back into the metal music now. So bands like
Yeah.
Sleep Token, Bring Me the Horizon, like some of these big kind of metalcore, metal sounding bands are kind of been getting a lot of play recently. So I tend to find it's the people and the timing of it that kind of influences me more than the specific place or the scene that I'm around at the time.
Yeah, I guess one thing I'd like to ask then is we're kind of like you sort of mentioned that like the band is a two piece at the moment. I guess
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions about that. You were kind of mentioning that at one point, kind of searching for a basis. Do you find Geo Postal to be an ever expanding project in terms of you kind of like absorb more members as you go along, or is it just going to be a two piece? How do you kind of perceive the future?
Um, I see it much the same way as Harry sort of arrived into the picture and just immediately clicked, brought energy, and it just worked. Uh, I see that being the future, at least from my perspective, is I'm not actively out there looking for people. But if the right person comes along, I'd love to bring more creative energy into the band.
Yeah.
Because I find a lot of the music that comes most natural to me is the sort of sound that we're creating. But I'd like to change things up, and having an extra set of ears, an extra input, it just allows you to build something even more. I
Yeah.
think to be more creative and to bounce extra ideas off each other. And so, you know, much the same way I went out and just doing the open mics myself, like myself and Harry are going to keep going. I've jammed with a couple of guitar players or a couple of bass players over the last year or so, and it just, we'd have one or two, but there's just an intangible thing that
Yeah.
when
Because
you
you're the
play with
sick
somebody
wall.
and it clicks, it's like, yeah, that's it. There's no thinking about it. And then
Yeah.
when it doesn't, you could both be the best musicians in the world, but if that magic thing isn't there, it's just going to be a more of a struggle.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
actually, now,
So,
sorry.
oh no, yeah. So that was kind of where I stand up. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like, now that you and Harry are so like kind of I don't know, in sync and kind of like familiar with each other. I mean, obviously, for the kind of music you're doing, one aspect that's very important, I think, is the sense of space and the sense of how you complement each other and how you also contrast each other, and kind of what those dynamics add to the sound and to the soundscape. You were kind of mentioned also the kind of like how kind of post rock is sort of a niche genre. I think actually having listened to your debut, I mean, I think it's actually very accessible. I don't think it's in any way alienating. I think anyone could listen to it and enjoy it. But at the same time, it's like if you add like new members, you potentially mess up that kind of like synchronicity, that kind of spaciousness. Is that something you have to consider then? Is how will a new member kind of change the dynamic, and then how would that also change how you play the songs that you and Harry just wrote together, if that makes sense?
Mhm. Yeah, like 100%. It's the biggest thing that sort of uh, I'm conscious of, because I do the songwriting from like a musical standpoint, and I've sort of gotten to this point, and I've been in a band where it's hard to get people to show up, and like
Yeah.
timing and schedules and everything. With two of us, it's easy. I just message Harry, when are you free? That's it. As soon as you start bringing in more people, conflict. Sorry, I can't do that evening. I can't do that day. So that's a big concern from the practical standpoint. And exactly as you said, when it comes to the songwriting, we have found that sort of connection and the synchronicity to make our sound our sound. And so that's very much why I'm not out there looking. I'm going to wait for somebody, the right person, to show up. And if they do, great. And if they don't, also great. You
Yeah.
know, we're not going to lose any sleep over it. Sorry, 1 second. I think that's Harry possibly here now.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, I'll be 2 seconds. I'm just going to run downstairs to let him in, if that's okay.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Aaron.
Hey.
Hello.
Harry's just in the door here.
How are you?
Let me unblur here so you can see him as well. Get rid of this.
How's it going?
How are we doing?
Well,
I
actually,
made it.
I'd like to get your perspective, Harry, now that you're here, because Sonny was talking a lot of shit about you. I'm joking.
Nothing.
Yeah, Sonny was kind of telling me the story about like when he was doing open micers, and you happened to be at one of the shows, was just kind of like drumming along. I was wondering from your perspective, I mean, what kind of like attracted you to what Sonny was doing?
My interaction. Well, you know what? there's not a lot of that style of music that's being played around Dublin. You know, I used to go to those open mics a lot. I'm playing with another band, Grunkle Funge, where that's set up by a fella by the name of Andy Kelly, and he goes to a lot of these nights. But I found that when I was joining bands, you kind of, as a drummer especially, and someone who doesn't necessarily write a lot of songs or any really of my own songs, I haven't really written solo. So it's all about joining bands. And then when I saw Sonny play, I was like, that's probably the closest to something that I actually listen to. You know what I mean? So, and I was kind of, it was also just after I had played for the first time outdoor concerts using like an in-ear pack. So it was something that I was kind of recognizing as it was a new experience for me. And then I realized that he was, you know, playing along to a click in his ear, and I was like latching onto that as well. But yeah, I was just drumming, you know, tapping away to the music, and I could hear it in my head, you know, that this needed drums. And yeah, something of the post-rock genre, I was like, yes, absolutely. I've always wanted to join in on something like that. And it's all a matter of finding people. So there you go. Fate.
Actually, when you guys like introduced yourselves and kind of got talking, like what did you find was the kind of commonalities in terms of what you're listening to, whether that was post-rock or not?
Well, yeah, like obviously the post-rock, there was
Explosions in the Sky.
Explosions in the Sky, we're both big fans of. And then of course Overhead the Albatross, who we went on to go see them live, and then talk to Dave Prendergast, who we got to record our music for us, which was another great little connection to make, because you know, who better to produce the music than somebody of a band that we like and a kind of sound that we're going for. But yeah, I'm sure, like, I'm pretty sure we also share a lot of interests in other genres of bands. You know, it's people always ask, you know, what kind of music are you into, and it's like it's literally everything of every genre. Like, and I can show elements of a completely out there band or maybe a different genre entirely, but there's something musically or rhythmically that you can work off as like inspiration.
So let me just change the light because it's going real dark. The light better. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I found playing with Harry is that, you know, we both love like post rock and that style, but we both just kind of like music in general, whatever sort of, if it's interesting and weird and kind of unique. The last band I think that Harry introduced me to was the Ollum. They're like a sort of Celtic fusion jazz band. They're really, really good. And, you know, they sort of have like a bit of an Irish trad sound. They play with like flutes and those kind of elements, but it's, you know, a really interesting way that they've sort of created their sound. And, you know, I came back from, they played in Vicar Street, and I came back from it and I was like, okay, I want to create a song with the same kind of idea behind it. And so I've actually written 3 songs that are sort of inspired by that vibe and genre, that I'm already thinking like, okay, if we can get an album done by the end of the year, I'd like those to be a follow-up EP of just this other style, a little experiment with that. And I think for me, that's one of my favorite things about playing with Harry, is that like, if either of us have an interesting idea or something weird we want to do, it's very much like, okay, hell yes, let's do it and try it and see what happens.
It keeps things interesting and exciting, you know, if you're not necessarily trying to replicate or live in a certain realm of a genre of music, because if you like, Ollum is a perfect example because they're using a lot of traditional Irish music techniques and rhythmic stuff that, like, if you can incorporate that into something that you're doing, which is, you know, like we'll say it's instrumental post rock, but it's also trying to be modern and fresh, or because it is a new idea. If you can grab elements that appeal to you and bring them into that, it's all about kind of swapping realms and then bringing a wider audience in. And just creating an atmosphere, you know.
Yeah. No,
So
actually, actually, just before you turned up, we were talking about how your debut single, Planet Express, is actually very accessible. I find anyway. What's interesting is I'm wondering, do you guys like find was it kind of a conscious effort when kind of like writing music, when recording music, to kind of have something that could potentially be adaptable to different scenarios? Because as you were mentioning, like in the press release I read, like, you guys were inspired by like kind of jazz and soul nights, as well as like kind of big festivals and kind of just like everything in between. And the way I could kind of envision you guys with this song kind of playing any of those kind of nights, like any kind of circumstance, was that kind of adaptability something which was thought of, or was it just, again, we're just writing what
well,
we want to write?
yeah, I don't think in any art form a lot of people really think about how it's going to be, like in what context it's going to be listened to.
Yeah.
Because it's in the creative process, you don't know which, you have to really let go of all expectations to make something that has substance to it. You're not like, oh, this people are gonna like this. And then even in the studio, certain elements did change. So it's, yeah, a finished song is like an encapsulation of all of this background work and inspiration and practice and jamming that preceded it. So
Yeah, for me, it was much more, much like I was saying about like the album. It wasn't, I didn't come up with it to think of, oh, this could be great for like a trad night, but it was more like I was inspired by this idea, created it, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, this is cool because, there's a bunch of Irish like things that we could apply to, or places where we could be like, hey, we have some of these trad elements, but our music sort of encapsulates more than that, and it could fit into a wider spectrum of scenes and festivals and places that, if people like the sort of experimental style of it, it could do really well.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's really cool that like you're still, not so married to a style that, like, you can't like go out and just hear something and then a whim kind of like go, yeah, when I like I think it's that very like organic, natural style of like what makes someone want to be a musician in the first place. Is like, it's difficult, I think, to go on a night out like and see like local bands and not in some way incorporate something, even if it's just like not even their music, but like even sometimes like I don't know, just the way they banter with the crowd in between, or just like any little like detail. It's hard not to kind of just naturally be inspired when that's kind of your I guess your vocation,
Yeah, the funny thing is, I was only chatting to one of my friends about it recently, but I've always been, let's say, if there's a band that I really like and they have a sound and it's good and I've listened to an album or two and I'm really into it, and then they come out with this new sound and a new album, I've always been a person who's like, but you were so good before and this is weird and different and I don't understand it. And now I'm here and that's everything I want to do, is like, is try some of this and some of this and some of this. It's funny to see the other side of it now and be like, okay, yes, I get it. They want to experiment and play and just enjoy the music. And if they just keep churning out the same sound, it kind of becomes dull.
It keeps things fresh, and I definitely got a bit of that kind of growing up as well. Like if you look at, I just remember that era of dubstep when that came in, and how that affected bands that I really liked at the time,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Korn and Muse. Just went through those two bands went through this kind of dubstep phase. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
maybe a bit too much.
Yeah.
But if you take like, I now it probably won't be the last time I reference this band. One of my favorites is And So I Watch You From Afar, for
yeah.
a band from Belfast. I've been a huge fan of them for years, and I'd say maybe their first album is still my favorite because I've listened to that most just because it came out first, So I listened to all their albums a lot. But after their second one, they swapped out one of their guitarists. So they swapped out Tony for Niall Arthur Kennedy, who is amazing. But when he came in, it kind of not fully changed the direction of the music, but added this very prominent element of there was a bit more kind of electronic sampling happening, and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but like there's some kind of, samba steel drum kind of bounciness happening to it. And it was just kind of this nice little modern flavor, which added to what was already great. And then it continued the progression of something not being static. And that's just something that I really enjoyed. But obviously at first, like things take a couple of listens, you're like, oh, don't take this thing I really like away from me by adding
Yeah.
this extra element in, and then you start to really appreciate it. And as you were saying with bands and their stage presence, it's like adding a new character to a TV show, and you're like not sure about them yet, but then they grow on you, and it just makes the family of what that is, like using the analogy of like a cast in a TV show you really like, or a band and their songs. Um, it's about not remaining static, really.
As a two piece, I was wondering, do you find trying to add additional dynamics into your music difficult to actually replicate live? We were kind of mentioning actually, just before you turned up, Harry, we were kind of talking about like, if it was right, potentially expanding the project with new members, but not forcing it, but just if it was felt like the right thing to do at any given time, that it's not something you necessarily be averse to. I was wondering, is there any kind of like with the limitations of a two piece, has that ever caused an issue in terms of anything you were trying to do, or has everything kind of been okay so far?
I mean, well, of course, when we recorded our songs, we recorded two, and we're going back in to record two more. Sonny's recording bass. Now, obviously, he can't play the bass as well as the guitar. We already have a backing track with the rhythm guitar, and we can use those stems, but they're not ready to go at the moment for live performance. So what you hear on the record is not yet adapted to our live performance. So we're kind of at a point where if we have everything recorded, we can use the stems and then just, throw out the bass sample. But I think having a bass player on stage would be really beneficial.
Yeah, and I think for myself as well, having two, like just the two of us on stage. I mean, it was amazing when Harry joined to have somebody to kind of bounce off of. But again, another person on stage just adds kind of more to the presence of the band on the stage, and you kind of have more interactions between each other, and there's a bit more naturalness to it because I play like the guitar parts that I play live over it, but everything else is kind of backing tracks and recorded and goes out, and it's not quite the same, as when you got a few people live playing it, and you can kind of bounce off each other and bring a bit more here and now to it.
Yeah. You guys have been very gracious for your time. I don't want to take up too much of it. I just have one last question. So yeah, the first single was Planet Express. It came out recently, I think last week. I was just wondering, kind of as sort of like, I guess, your first like introduction as a band, why did you choose this song over the other song that you recorded? And generally, kind of what can people kind of expect from the songs that are coming up soon? Are they going to be sort of released as singles, or is the plan to record them and release it as an EP, or what's the kind of plans in terms of the release schedule?
So I think we went with Planet Express, as I was saying to you earlier. Like Planet Express was the first one that we kind of wrote together. So I think from that standpoint, it was a nice like signifier of like this was us and our music that we were putting out into the world together. But it also, when we started playing it, was one of the most fun ones to play. It had the most,
because it was this fresh idea that we, because obviously Sonny had a collection of songs that he would play live by himself that I then joined in on. But there's a lot of great things that happen in the studio when we jam and play together, these riffs that come out of nowhere. So you'll hear like in Planet Express where there's that kind of hook where there's the stabs, the bum, 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 bum. So playing that off the cuff in the studio, there's such a rewarding thing when you're both on the button and you're both kind of like hitting these staccato notes. And then of course the riff as well. It's all about the riff.
Yeah, like it's funny that the stabby bit in there, like part of it was just because I screwed up what I was playing. I just sort of hit a note by accident, and I was like, "Hold on a second,
Yeah.
that sounds way better." And
Yeah.
those sorts of little, happy accidents that come out of that improv and the studio playing, um, is why it's been great to just get together regularly, play, and I think, yeah, those are kind of the reasons why that felt like the most natural first song for us. In terms of what's coming next, yeah, as we said, next month we have a single "Steady the Hand" coming out. That was actually the first song that I wrote myself when I started doing this post-rock sound. So again, it's kind of one of the ones uh, from the collection of songs that I was originally playing, it's the one that I was always most proud of, and like I enjoyed sort of playing the most. I feel like it had a lot in it, and so that felt like, for me anyway, like a natural next one to come along. Um, and from there, we have, as I said, going back to do two more next week. So hopefully, we want to get kind of single through the year to kind of keep building momentum. We're doing a festival down in Galway, Livestock, in Akram in July. So that's the first festival we're doing together, and super excited about that. And then I want to get back into the studio before the end of the year to finish off an album, to do an extra 5-6 songs. And, if we can sort of tick off all of those boxes by the end of 2024, that's a very successful year in my books.
Good to have an agenda. Sure.
Yeah.
And between then, I imagine there probably be some gigs here and there. I guess, and you were mentioning like Shanae and Fibbers and stuff like that. So if they could
April 13th, we have a gig in Shanae. We're playing with Silverglass, and there's another band that we need to figure out. But that's going to be I'm hoping that it can be the first like post-prog math rock night that we're going to put on that's specifically dedicated to that, and have that become a regular thing to start rebuilding that scene and connecting with the community and other bands who are doing that sound, because exactly as Harry said, it's hard to find.
The scene needs a revamp. It was because it was a lot more prominent. I don't know how many years ago. We'll say 10. Be conservative.
Yeah, it was like the early 2010s. I remember it was like massive.
Yeah, exactly. So there was loads of great bands. Like even Dave from the Albatross was telling us, mentioning a few that we haven't heard of, because you don't know what kind of directions they go in. Like I was always a huge fan of the Redneck Manifesto.
Yeah.
They were actually on the bill for Beyond the Pale this year, but they rarely play. But bands like that, and then Enemies.
They've just started coming back, playing live again. They're Irish, aren't they?
They are, yeah. So Enemies played. They were one of those bands. Actually, Redneck Manifesto is the same. Who had gigs in the past 5-10 years that were advertised even as their last gig.
Yeah.
And Enemies playing in Vicar Street, was one of the best gigs I've ever seen there. Like, they're fantastic, because they had their old drummer Oisín. He hopped on for a couple of songs. He originally played with them, and then he was replaced by Micheál Quinn, who came back to play there. Micheál, who also plays for Melty Brains and Dermot Kennedy, so he's toured the world with him. So
that's a great CV.
yeah, exactly. It's something else. So yeah, and obviously all these bands have great drummers, so that's something that's really inspired me over the years. When I was younger, you're learning the basics on drums, and you're learning Green Day or whatever it is at the time, and then you're listening to these post-rock bands, and you're like, someday I'll be able to play something like that. So hopefully I'm getting in there now that we're reached our 30s.
Yeah.
But hopefully bring it back in. And there's, as Sonny was saying, Silverglass is joining us. They're fantastic. Sonny has gone to see them play once. I haven't seen them perform yet, so I'm excited for that. So there is a bit of an indulgence to do these gigs, that you're kind of doing it to watch the bands as well as have them on the bill.
This is it. Like, I'm a big post rock fan, so I just want to see more of it. I want to find more of these bands, and if you build it, they will come, right?
Thanks very much for your time, guys. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up, or?
No, as I said, Steady the Hand coming out next month. 2 more singles will be coming out over the summer. Gig April 13th in Chennai. That'll be fun. And we've been playing in there pretty regularly. We're going to try to get in there monthly to do it consistently. And then Livestock down in Galway in July. This first festival. Looking to do a few more, reached out to I said Adam Kelly with Smithfield Creatives. He puts on a festival called The Works in Smithfield.
Yeah.
So hoping to try get in there, and there's a few more of those kind of things that we're looking to do. But yeah, that's all the excitement. And then album by the end of the year, and it's been a good 24.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Actually, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but actually, one thing you mentioned there about doing the festivals, one thing I think is really cool and what's happening lately is that certainly like more so than like it was a decade ago or anything, I think festivals are becoming a lot more accessible to kind of newer bands. They're just kind of like directly saying, here's a page, fill out this form, send your music here. Obviously now that you have music out, I mean, it's going to be, I think, probably a lot easier now to actually start like securing those kind of festivals. But I think it's really great now that festivals are a lot more open to kind of sort of unsolicited requests, let's say, of just kind of like people sending in their stuff, and hopefully some people get kind of like exposure through that, and we'll get some cool opportunities.
That's it, because it can feel very sort of obscure to how you get the connections to even know where to apply, or even what festivals are out there. Like, I didn't even know this festival existed down in Galway, except that one of my aunts knows one of the fellas who works for it or runs for it. And so you like a lot of these smaller festivals, especially where they don't have as many of these big highlight names, the ideal kind of starting points. And so trying to find those where they're on, I'm happy to play in any corner of the country on any day of the week. If there's a stage there and a place to go and play, sign me up and we'll do it. But even just discovering them is half the battle. So I've been trying to amass names of festivals and connections to them.
Yeah, and it's always good to just get involved in any festival, any sort of community that you can get involved in, because you'll find people that have similar interests, and that you might get good feedback. And then also people organizing these festivals, they could get bigger. One of them could be the next Knockanstockan, which of course we all sorely miss.
R.I.P.
That was because that would have been the
was
perfect
actually
one.
Knockanstockan was kind of like the festival that really did kind of give a lot of bands like that, but probably the first festival that really did give people that kind of like easy entry.
And I mean, no more than myself just doing the open mics and bumping into Harry there. Like, you put yourself out there, you play at these, and you make connections through. You just, people call it luck or coincidence or whatever, but you have to do all the work to get there, get on stage, and then it sort of turns into luck. But you kind of you have to be there, and so that's why it's ideal if you can find those kind of places to just keep going and hopefully bump into people along the way.
Perfect. Thanks very much for your time, guys. It was really nice talking with you.
Yeah, likewise. You too, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Best of luck.
Cheers. Take it easy.
Bye.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. If you liked it, please subscribe and stick around, because we have plenty more like this coming soon.